Hey, it's Melissa Carter, publisher and author at Winging Dude Publishing, an indie publishing house. I started, back in 2020 is when I established the company. And we talk about that in other videos, but basically it's getting the LLC, getting the bank account, went ahead and established it in 2020 during the pandemic, and then decided last year, and this, I'm recording this actually in 2024, but in the summer of 2023, decided that I was going to do something with it and to write my memoir called Facing Inward, which will be released in the spring of 2025. So I want to talk a little bit about other things besides writing that you have to think about when you are a self-publisher. And I think that there's not as much of a stigma on self-publishing, but there definitely is this idea that a self-published title is not as good a quality as something from a publishing house. And the main difference, I think, with self-publishing and working with a publisher is just the commitment to trying to do as much as you can for your own book and giving yourself the time to do it. So you're in charge of when it's released, you're in charge of the cover, you're in charge of what's going on inside. If you have a mind for marketing, if you have a mind for sales, if you have, you don't even need a lot of books, you have something that's specific and unique to you and your profession, then I think self-publishing is a great way to go. The issue with publishing, now, of course, publishing houses, they make it easy because they print it, they distribute it, they market it. And the idea is, oh, if I get accepted by a publishing house, then I will have a million sales and they'll sell it across the world and they'll translate it in all these languages. I mean, that's true, except for the sales part. Because with a lot of publishing companies, you find that people don't make a lot of money. They don't make as much of the percentage of the sales. And nowadays, publishers are, even when you apply or submit your proposal to a publishing house, which I've done, and this is one of the other reasons that I've decided to self-publish. This idea for the stories that I have in my book, I've submitted to publishers over the past few years. So when I established Wing and Dude Publishing in 2020, the idea was, well, that would be the company that I would get paid from by the publisher for the sales of books. And so I submitted proposals to publishers, several publishers, and in the application of submission, it asks, how are you going to market this book? So even they will let you know, look, we are not going to be solely responsible for the sales of your book. If you're a big author, if you're a Stephen King or, whatever genre you're into in the top authors, a Brene Brown or whoever, then more than likely the publisher is going to give you a nice, stipend up front to have you commit to their publishing house, and they're going to sell you a million copies. But if you're somebody who's starting out and somebody who doesn't have a national recognition, then that's going to be difficult. And I think that that's what I found is, even though I have been privileged to have success within the city of Atlanta, when it comes to media, I am not a national name. I'm not an international name. So these publishing houses rejected me. I mean, there were dozens that rejected any ideas that I had given them. And I tried to do several. And, one gave me good feedback about continue to do this. We just can't do this. But I think it's because, look, she's not a built-in marketing gem that we can easily put out there. So that's why I decided to self-publish. And I'm doing it in a different way. I am not going to do print on demand for this book because my main reason, I don't want the cost of the book to be higher than its competing books. Like if you go to the bookstore and you see my book and you flip it over and you're interested, but you look at the price and it's like $10, $15 more than the rest of the books, that's usually what happens with print on demand is these publishing houses have the funds to mass produce these books, where print on demand is printing one at a time, and things are always cheaper in bulk. And so that's why I'm like, you know what? Here's my experiment. I've tried print on demand, and I appreciate the people. And I have a link down below for Well of an Idea. You're more than welcome to purchase that great children's book. Rich and Kat, their talent is all over those pages, and I would love to promote their work. This time, though, since I'm just doing this on my own, I have decided that I'm going to save up, put the cash up front, and buy a bulk of books in order to sell them everywhere. So what do you have to think about? What do I have to think about in order to do this? Well, it's not just about writing the book. It's about me being in charge. I'm the CEO of Facing Inward. I'm the CEO of Wang and Dude Publishing. So what do I have to think about? Well, as we are talking, my manuscript is now at the editor. Now, when I write on the laptop, and then what I do is I print it out. I take a break from my writing, then I print it out, and then I kind of use a pen to mark down, oh, I'd rather use this word. I edit my own thing as a printout. Then I go back to the laptop, correct my notes, use my notes to correct the manuscript, and then I keep going. But when you're so attached to something and you really want it to look good and sound good, you really need a separate, unemotional, unattached set of eyes to take a look at it. So what's the difference between a published book from a publishing house and a potential self-publisher who doesn't use an editor? That right there. So an editor's job is there's several things an editor can do. There's several types of editors. And each one has their different vernacular. But basically, you can either get like a proofreader who's just going to look at the spelling, or you can get somebody that's not only going to look at the spelling and punctuation, but also look at the flow of the book and give you the feedback on, okay, I see what you were trying to do here, but you missed the mark here, and I wasn't so sure about what you were trying to say there in this. And that's what I hired. And so you have to have the funds, because you're a CEO of a company, to hire someone, a freelancer, in order to do this work. So my manuscript is currently at the editor. And one of the concerns you have when you write is this going to be good? I'm doing all these videos and I'm promoting this book, and you hope that, oh my God, it's not a completed piece yet. And you're hoping it's going to be good, because why am I going to give all this build up for you to buy the book and go, God, that sucked. So that's why you get an editor, is because she's going to tell me first if I suck. And then if she says, well, it's not like she's going to reject the book. She's not a publisher, but what she can do, and I'm hiring her to do, is to tell me, tough love, look, I think you need to change this, that, and the other, as opposed to just doing the spell check. So that's why you need an editor. Is it too long? Is it too short? When I get it back, there's going to be another, not full rewrite, but it's going to be a polishing of the manuscript. Then, and that's something I set up. Now, let me say this too. That's something I set up 3 months before I finished the manuscript, setting up an editor. And I waited a little too late, because the initial thought this year in my mind is, okay, let me get the book done by January, by the end of January, then get it to an editor. And then that gives me plenty of time at the end of the year to get things together before it's published in the spring. Because again, this is my first go around. So I work where I need to give myself time to kind of wrap my mind around what I need to do and not make silly mistakes that will delay the publishing of the book. Well, in this case, when I reached out to her in January or December, I think I reached out to her in December, she said, I don't have an opening till May. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I was a little late in even reaching out to her. So if you're going to get an editor for your book, you need to reach out to them in advance. And so I'm like, cool, well, give me May. I'll take May. And that gave me an extra couple months to really kind of, okay, let me take a hard look and finish this manuscript and get it in working order before I get it to her. And so that's what you need to do. Give yourself plenty of time to reach out to an editor. And you can find editors online. Like I said, I've used Peter Bowerman's book, The Well-Fed Self-Publisher. I've mentioned in other videos about different books I've used. So there's other resources out there. If you know an editor, I purposely wanted an editor who had worked in media or worked in publishing before. And so the editor I chose is someone who had been a journalist in the past and had worked with other books. And so somebody that could talk my language, since we both had the media and news media background. That's why I chose who I chose, because I wanted to be able to communicate effectively with her. Who else do I? Indexer. An indexer. What does an indexer do? Well, sometimes you take for granted when you're reading a book, and especially if you're doing a nonfiction book that has a lot of reference materials in it or keywords, then you have to have an indexer who puts all that together in the back of the book. Are you going to do that? I mean, if you're an indexer, then all, all credit to you. I didn't even know that that's something you need to do. So an indexer is someone that you need to search for, and an indexer comes after the editor. A formatter, somebody who formats the book. So just because you do something in your Word document and type it in Times New Roman font, 12 font with single space, that's not necessarily what is needed in order to print that book or to make it an ebook if you choose to go that route. And that's something else to talk about. You don't have to print your books. If you have something that you think would just be better served as an ebook, then that's a lot cheaper, but you still need a formatter in order to do that, because every ebook platform may need a different format for that book, because you certainly don't want to open an ebook and the spacing is wrong and everything is just, because they'll immediately not read that book if it looks weird on an ebook platform. So you need somebody who formats the books and can translate it for ebooks. And sometimes a printer can do that. That's the main company that you have to look for, is a printer. If you are someone doing it yourself, and in my case, I'm not doing print on demand, so I'm looking for an actual physical printer to do this, then you have to search and get quotes for your books. Now, when you get a printer, what do you have to think about? Well, you have to think about the size of your book. Something else that, I didn't consider. And then the way I decided the size of my book, and all of this that I'm going over will go into further detail in other videos. So it's not like I'm just going to breeze over this, but I just want to kind of give an idea or a list of what you have to think about when you're doing your own book. I went into my bookshelf and I grabbed the books that I really connected with, and I liked the feel of them when it came to size. And I was like, oh, well, because when you reach out to a printer, they're going to say, well, we're happy to give you a quote, but we need to know the following things. What size of the book? Are you doing paperback or hardback? And I'm only doing paperback because hardback is expensive. And since I'm funding this myself, and I'm not planning on doing a hardback and then a paperback release and big events like that. I'm just doing paperback because of cost. Then it was like, well, what kind of paperback? Do you want the slick, or do you want the matte, or do you, what kind of pages, what color of the pages do you want? What's the texture of the pages you want? So you have to think about the product itself, not just the fact that you're writing. And I think that's the main thing for a lot of authors, that you have to ask yourself. Am I capable of considering all these things, or is this overwhelming? Like, Melissa, you're overwhelming me with all this information. You have to know yourself. So if you're overwhelmed by the information, want to be a self-publisher, and you don't need a massive amount of books, then again, print on demand may be something that's worth it for you, especially if you want somebody to print it and you're just going to buy a box of books and do it on your own, especially if you're going to do it where you give them away for free. Then print on demand is for you, because you pay a certain fee to get the box of books, and you just, that's your either tax write-off or business cost or whatever. And you can get, and you don't have to worry about everything that I'm mentioning. But if you want to get more profit from the book, and you're willing to put the money up and think about all these things, then using yourself as an indie publisher may be the way to go for you. And the final thing that I had to think about is, who's going to distribute this book? Now, am I going to be in my garage when people buy the book and mailing them off? I know myself. No, I'm not going to be the person who gets the books where they need on time, and dealing with the post office and dealing with shipping and getting my own machines at home and the whole thing. I'm not going to do that. So I know myself, and I need someone to do that for me. And that's where you decide whether a distributor or a wholesaler. And I had a printer tell me, because the beauty of this environment is when you reach out to these people, you reach out to an editor, you reach out to an indexer, you reach out to the formatter, you reach out to the printer, they all know people. So sometimes you just find one and they'll reference others, and then there's your network. And everybody I've reached out to has been so incredibly helpful in forwarding me people's information, having me talk to people. This person does that. You need to consider this. And the printer, when I was getting a quote, said, hey, don't forget that if you're self-publishing, a lot of times, if you want these in bookstores, that bookstores, especially chain bookstores, don't deal with self-publishers. They don't, it's not like I can walk into a Barnes and Noble or contact Amazon for print, because Amazon is just a distributor. But I can't go into a Barnes and Noble brick and mortar and say, hey, here's my book, would you please buy it? Because they're a chain bookstore. And they deal with either distributors or wholesalers. They don't deal with the individual publishing houses. So that's something else to think about. And you have to get ISBNs, and you have to get EANs, and the barcode on the back of the book, that is your responsibility. The ISBN for the book, that is your responsibility. Now, again, there are people, it's almost like wedding planners. There are book planners. There are people who will walk you through every step for a fee and help you with this. So if you want to do it, I'm not discouraging anybody. It's just, look, if you want to do this, there's a lot to think about. And then you have to decide what you're capable of doing and what you want to do and what your goal is for this. And you can get it done. It's just how you're going to get it done is what it needs to be determined. And for me, I did not want to do print on demand. I was willing to invest in myself in this. I do want this to be in bookstores. I do want this to be in libraries, which is a whole different way of doing that. And I am doing an ebook, and I am doing an audiobook. Now, because I'm in media and because I've done radio my whole life, I'm doing my own audiobook, because that is not something intimidating to me. That's just, I've been trained to do something like that for 25, 30 years. But if you want an audiobook, that's something else you have to hire out to be able to do. So and then if you don't have the funds, again, ebook only. There's a lot of people who have success with just doing ebooks. So these are all things to think about. Wholesaler, distributor, printer, indexer, formatter, editor, all these things. But that's what I'm willing to do. I want to do. I'm curious about it. And so that's why I wanted to share these videos. Now, like I said, we'll go into detail about each and every one of those things as time goes on, because I want to share all this with you until the book is published, and then even share after that, the challenges, because then we haven't even gotten into marketing the book. The galleys. The galley, if you've never been in the publishing industry, a galley is a rough print of a book where there may be mistakes in it, there may be, but you send it out to different, book editors and people who may review the books, and people you may want to get to write a quote for you. Some books have hey, this is the best book of the century from the New York Times. You have to do a galley, which is a cheaper version of a printed form of your book, and send it to the New York Times so that they will review it in time for you to have that printed on your book when it's released. I mean, I appreciate what publishing houses do, and I appreciate now more the books that I read and what went into the books that I read. And I just hope that this is useful for you. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them or find the answers. You can do it in the comments below. And also down below, we have links to books, to ways you can support the channel, all these things. But thank you so much for being here. I hope you subscribe and get notifications for whenever there's other videos. Share this with people that you know that want to write a book, and tell them to do it, because the whole point of this is not, again, to discourage you. It's to get you to do it. But if you know what you're doing, sometimes you're more successful at it. And I hope that, everybody gets a chance, if they want to publish a book, to be able to do it. So thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.